The
We all
elevator
have
door
stories we
slid
carry
open on
with
the
us, some
12th floor of
heavy,
Morgan
some
Health
light.
Systems corporate
This
headquarters,
one,
and
this
Alexander
one
Morgan
changed
heard voices
everything for
before he
me.
saw anyone.
And when I look
The
back now,
insurance
I
meeting with
realize how
Berkshire Health
young
had
we
wrapped up
were.
faster than
We
expected.
thought we knew
Richard
everything,
Carmichael had
but we were
signed without
just
the usual
beginning.
haggling,
You
so
see, the thing
Alexander
about
had
growing
returned to the
older is
office
you
90 minutes
realize what
early on that
truly
Tuesday
matters.
afternoon in
It's not
January.
the wealth,
His good
it's
mood
the
dissolved the
connections
moment
you
he
build.
recognized his son-in-law's voice drifting from the half-open conference room door. "How much longer do we wait? He's 62. This could drag on another decade." Alexander stopped mid-stride. The leather portfolio under his arm suddenly felt heavy. "He built this place. You know he'll never voluntarily step aside." That was Rachel, his daughter. Her voice carried that clipped impatience she'd inherited from her mother. Alexander stepped back into the elevator alcove, hidden from view, but close enough to hear Daniel Harrison's response. "Then we need to accelerate the timeline. There are legal options." The conference room door swung partially closed, muffling the rest. Alexander caught fragments. "Make sure everything transfers smoothly when—" The words hit like cold water. 30 seconds passed. He counted them, forcing his breathing to stay even. Then he walked toward the conference room with deliberate footsteps, leather soles announcing his presence against the polished floor. When he entered, Daniel and Rachel jerked their heads toward him. Daniel's hand moved quickly, sliding a stack of legal documents into a folder. "Working late, I thought you'd both left for the day." Alexander kept his voice casual, conversational. Daniel recovered smoothly. "Just reviewing Q4 projections. Some concerning trends. Anything requiring my immediate attention?" "Nothing urgent. We'll discuss at Thursday's meeting." Alexander nodded, noting how Rachel wouldn't meet his eyes. The manila folder sat between them like evidence at a crime scene. Whatever he'd interrupted, they both knew he'd heard something, and they all pretended otherwise. 30 years building something real, and they wanted it handed over like car keys. It took Alexander Morgan 30 years to build Morgan Health Systems from a single urgent care clinic in Queens to a network of 10 state-of-the-art facilities across New York City. Every brick, every contract, every employee had his fingerprints on them. The company wasn't just his legacy, it was his life's work constructed through endless 16-hour days, mortgaged homes, and missed family vacations. Now his own flesh and blood wanted to take it from him. 2 hours later, Alexander sat across from Daniel in the executive dining room on the 15th floor. The January sun slanted through floor-to-ceiling windows, harsh and cold. Rachel had joined them, picking at her solid while Daniel launched into what he probably thought was a careful pitch. "The industry is changing fast, Alex. Younger leadership brings fresh perspective." Alexander cut his steak methodically, keeping his hand steady. "I've adapted to every change in 30 years. What makes this different? No offense, but traditional methods don't work anymore. You're—" Daniel paused, searching for diplomatic phrasing. "Old, you can say it. Established, set in your ways. The company needs room to evolve." Alexander placed his fork down deliberately, the small clink against china marking a shift in the conversation. "My will is clear. After I'm gone, everything passes to Rachel. Managed by you. Until then, I run this company." Daniel leaned forward, invading the space across the table. His voice dropped lower, harder. "That's not good enough. We need control now." "Need or want?" Daniel's jaw clenched. The careful mask he'd been wearing cracked slightly. "You're making a mistake. Holding on too tight breaks things." Alexander maintained steady eye contact. "Are you threatening me, Daniel?" Before he could answer, Rachel spoke up. "Dad, you're being unreasonable. We're family. Why can't you trust us?" Something twisted in Alexander's chest, but he kept his voice level. "Trust is earned through actions, not demanded through blood." "You've never believed in me." Rachel's fingers twisted her wedding ring round and round. "Never thought I was capable. I gave you a position. You chose to use it against me." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping backward. Daniel rose with her, towering over Alexander for a moment in what he recognized as a calculated power display. "Daniel's right," Rachel said, her voice tight. "You'll regret pushing us away." They gathered their things, Daniel slapping his folder against the table with more force than necessary, and left. Rachel hesitated at the door, glancing back once. Whatever guilt flickered across her face vanished quickly when Daniel called her name from the hallway. Alexander sat alone at the table. His coffee had gone cold. Through the windows, the city sprawled beneath him, indifferent to the small drama playing out on the 15th floor. An ambulance siren wailed somewhere far below, fading into the general noise. Back in his office, Alexander locked the door, something he rarely did. The click of the deadbolt felt significant, permanent. He pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk, the one that required a key he kept on a chain. Inside were corporate financial records, expense reports, vendor contracts. He spread the latest expense reports across the mahogany surface. His finger traced a line of transactions marked with Daniel's approval signature. Meridian medical supplies amounts ranging from $3,000 to $8,000 recurring monthly. Alexander pulled out his vendor contracts, flipping through until he found the medical equipment suppliers they'd used for years. Meridian Medical Supplies wasn't listed. The numbers didn't align with any contract he'd authorized. Small enough amounts to slip past cursory review, large enough to add up over time. He sat back in his chair, the leather creaking. That conversation he had overheard wasn't casual complaining. It was scheming. Accelerate the timeline. Legal options. What exactly had they been planning before he interrupted? Alexander thought he knew his daughter. He thought he'd trained Daniel well, brought him into the business, given him opportunities. He'd been wrong about both of them. His hand rested on a folder embossed with the Morgan Health Systems logo, his creation built from nothing over 3 decades. The winter light was fading now, casting long shadows across the office. He looked at the framed photographs on his wall. Ribbon-cutting ceremonies, community, awards, medical conferences. Daniel had waved dismissively at those photos during a meeting last month. At the time, Alexander thought he was just being careless. Now he understood it was contempt. He pulled his phone from his pocket and photographed the expense reports, each page clearly showing Daniel's signature. Then he returned everything to the drawer and locked it again. Through his office window, he could see the lights of Manhattan flickering to life as darkness settled over the city. Somewhere in this building, Daniel and Rachel were probably celebrating what they thought was his weakness, his sentimentality, his unwillingness to see what they were really doing. They wanted the company. Fine. Alexander spoke aloud to the empty office, his voice steady and cold. You want the company. Let's see if you can handle what comes next. He opened his laptop and created a new folder, Q1 Audit Prep. Innocent enough. Inside, he began documenting everything he'd noticed. Every conversation, every irregularity. If they wanted to play this game, they'd discover he'd been playing longer than they'd been alive. 3 weeks crawled past. February arrived with dirty snow piling against Manhattan curbs and a coldness that had nothing to do with weather. Alexander had been coming to the office earlier each morning, often arriving by 7, sometimes earlier. The townhouse on the Upper East Side, his property, his name on the deed, had become uncomfortable. Daniel and Rachel lived there too, an arrangement that had seemed practical when he'd offered it 2 years ago. Now it felt like enemy territory. He kept his distance. Let them think he was retreating. Let them believe he was just an old man clinging to past glories, too stubborn to recognize reality. Meanwhile, he documented everything. On a gray Tuesday morning in early February, Alexander pushed through the revolving doors of Morgan Health Systems headquarters at 6:45 a.m. The lobby was empty except for security. He rode the elevator to the 12th floor, expecting the usual silence of an office not yet awake. Instead, lights blazed in the main conference room. Through the glass walls, he saw Daniel standing at the head of the table, Alexander's usual position, addressing 3 of their clinic directors. Sarah Chen wasn't among them, notable, since she'd been his most trusted operational manager for a decade. Alexander didn't hesitate. He walked straight into the conference room. The conversation died mid-sentence. Daniel's expression flickered surprise, then annoyance, then that smooth professional mask he wore. Early morning meeting, initiative I'm leading. He didn't move from the head of the table. Didn't want to bother you with the details. The 3 clinic directors looked uncomfortable. Marcus Washington, who had been with Alexander since the beginning, stared at his notepad. Any meeting involving my clinic directors requires my approval, Alexander said, letting each word land clearly. We're just discussing operational improvements, nothing that affects strategy. Alexander turned to the directors. I'll expect full notes on my desk within the hour. They nodded, avoiding Daniel's glare. Alexander left without another word, but he'd made his point. Whatever Daniel had told them about upcoming organizational changes and new reporting structure, they now understood Alexander wasn't going anywhere. That evening, Alexander returned to the townhouse later than usual. Rachel's coat hung in the hallway, but when he called out, she didn't answer. He found a note on the kitchen counter in her handwriting. Working late, don't wait up. She was home. He'd seen her silhouette pass across the upstairs hallway window. Alexander climbed the stairs to his private study, the room he'd used for decades filled with medical journals and family photographs from better times. The door was open. Daniel sat at his desk, papers spread across the surface, using Alexander's space without permission. "That's my desk, Daniel." Daniel didn't look up immediately, making Alexander wait. When he finally raised his eyes, there was no apology in them. "Just needed space to work. Thought you'd be at the office longer. This is my home, my private office." "Technically, it's the family home." Daniel gestured vaguely at the walls. "We all live here." Alexander felt his jaw tighten. "My name on the deed says otherwise." Daniel gathered his papers slowly, deliberately, taking his time. As he passed Alexander in the doorway, he paused. "You should really think about what we discussed. This doesn't have to be difficult." Alexander didn't respond. After Daniel left, he looked at his desk. Daniel had rearranged items, small changes but noticeable. Territorial marking, like an animal claiming space. Alexander began arriving at the office before Daniel every morning after that. He started locking files in his personal, safe documents Daniel had previously been able to access. He changed passwords on company systems, small defensive moves that added up to a fortress. Mid-February, Alexander stayed late reviewing monthly financial reports. The office was silent except for the hum of heating vents and distant traffic. He pulled up the expense tracking system, sorting by approver. There it was again, Meridian Medical Supplies. Another payment, this time $7,800. He cross-referenced procurement contracts, nothing. No authorized agreement, no competitive bid, no signed terms, but Daniel's digital signature appeared on every approval. Alexander photographed each screen with his phone, making sure the dates and amounts were clearly visible. Then he pulled vendor registration documents. Meridian Medical Supplies had been added to their approved vendor list 8 months ago. The authorization, Daniel Harrison, Chief Operating Officer. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. Small amounts designed to slip past audits. Recurring charges that looked legitimate on surface review. But when you added them up over 8 months, they totaled nearly $250,000 paid to a company that didn't match any service they'd actually received. Whatever Daniel was planning, he needed money and he was stealing it from the company he wanted to inherit. 2 days later, Alexander received a call from Gerald Thompson, their largest insurance partner. They'd worked together for 15 years, built a strong relationship through consistent performance and mutual respect. "Alexander, good to hear your voice. I wanted to follow up on our conversation last week." Alexander frowned. "We didn't speak last week, Gerald." Pause. "Oh, Daniel said he mentioned you'd be stepping back soon. Wanted to make sure I understood the transition plan." Alexander's hand tightened on the phone. "There are no transitions planned." Daniel spoke without authority. "That's awkward." He seemed quite certain about the timeline. "I'll address this internally. Our partnership remains unchanged." After they hung up, Alexander sat staring at his office wall. Daniel wasn't just undermining him privately anymore. He was actively telling their partners Alexander was leaving, creating the narrative before reality had a chance to interfere. Alexander found Daniel in his office an hour later. He was on his cell phone laughing at something the person on the other end said. When he saw Alexander in the doorway, his expression shifted to professional neutrality. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone. Then to Alexander, "Something wrong. You told Thompson I'm retiring." "I'm not." Daniel shrugged, entirely unrepentant. "I said transitions eventually happen." He asked about succession planning. I answered honestly. "Honestly, you implied it's imminent." "You can't run this forever, Alexander. Stakeholders need assurance there's a plan." "The plan is you inherit when I die, not before. Stop creating confusion." "Maybe you should consider making it sooner rather than later." Daniel's voice had that edge now, the smooth veneer cracking. "For everyone's sake." Alexander left before saying something he'd regret. The office felt different now. Other employees had started noticing the tension. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. The atmosphere had soured, poisoned by whatever narrative Daniel was spreading. Late February brought another confrontation. Alexander had been working until 9:00 most evenings, deliberately avoiding the townhouse. When he finally returned that Thursday night, Daniel was waiting in the living room, not reading, not watching television, just sitting in the armchair by the window, clearly waiting for him. "We need to talk about your role in the company." Alexander hung his coat, slowly buying time to control his response. I'm not interested in this conversation again. You're becoming a burden. Daniel stood blocking Alexander's path to the stairs. Operations are suffering because you won't delegate. Delegate or surrender. Call it what you want. Maybe it's time to rest. Enjoy retirement. Travel. Whatever people do when they stop working. Alexander met his eyes directly. That sounds less like advice and more like a push. Take it however you want. Daniel's voice dropped lower, almost threatening. Things are going to change one way or another. Rachel appeared in the hallway, then drawn by their raised voices. She stood beside Daniel, not between them. Her silence spoke volumes. Alexander looked at his daughter, really looked at her, saw how she'd positioned herself physically and metaphorically, saw how she wouldn't meet his eyes, saw how her hand rested on Daniel's arm, a gesture of alliance. I'm sleeping at the office tonight, Alexander said. Don't wait up. He grabbed his keys and walked out, leaving them standing together in the living room of his house. The office couch wasn't comfortable, but he'd slept in worse places. He lay there in the darkness, city lights filtering through the blinds, thinking about everything that had happened since that overheard conversation in January. This wasn't about business disagreements anymore. Daniel wasn't just impatient or ambitious. He was planning something, and those financial irregularities were part of it. Alexander's daughter, who he'd raised and loved and given every opportunity, was watching her husband threaten him and saying nothing. He'd built this company for family. Now family was trying to steal it. His phone buzzed on the desk. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. He almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Urgent meeting tomorrow with potential investors, Daniel said without preamble. 9:00 a.m. Need you there. Which investors? I'll brief you tomorrow. Oh, and your car's in the shop. Right engine trouble, you mentioned it last week. Alexander hadn't mentioned car trouble. It's fine. Might be faster to take the subway anyway. Morning traffic's terrible this time of year. Green line to 42nd should put you right there. Something in his voice made Alexander's instincts flare. Too casual, too specific about the route. I'll be there, Alexander said slowly. Great. See you tomorrow. The call ended. Alexander stared at his phone in the darkness, Daniel's words echoing. Why had he assumed the car was broken? Why suggest the subway so specifically? Whatever they were planning, Alexander needed to be 3 steps ahead. But lying there on that uncomfortable couch, he couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow morning something was going to shift. Some line would be crossed. Some point of no return reached. He was right to be suspicious. He just didn't know yet how right. Alexander had been living in the converted office space for a week when the call came 8:45 on a Wednesday morning in early March, and he was surrounded by financial documents spread across a folding table that served as both desk and dining surface. The apartment was temporary, impersonal, just a place to sleep while he figured out his next move away from the townhouse that no longer felt like home. Daniel's name flashed on his phone screen. He almost didn't answer. We have a serious problem. Daniel's voice carried manufactured urgency. United Healthcare is pulling out. Alexander sat down his coffee carefully. What we just renewed that contract in January. Their risk assessment team found issues. They're at the office now demanding to speak with you personally. What kind of issues? Compliance concerns, operational questions. I don't have details. They want the owner. Nobody else will do. He paused. Will you come or not? Every instinct told Alexander this was wrong, but the scenario was plausible enough to investigate. United Healthcare represented 30% of their revenue. I'll drive, be there in 20 minutes. You haven't checked traffic. FDR's completely blocked. Overturned semi near 96th Street. Alexander pulled up the traffic app on his phone. Daniel was right. A solid red line stretched along the highway. How do you know that? I just tried leaving for a meeting. Turned back. It's a nightmare. We'll never make it by car. Take the subway. Lexington line goes straight to the office. The logic was sound. Alexander hated being maneuvered, but time mattered if this crisis was real. Where should we meet? Lexington Avenue, 63rd Street Station. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Alexander grabbed his jacket and left, locking the door twice out of habit. The walk to the subway took 5 minutes. Daniel was already waiting at the top of the stairs, hands buried in his coat pockets, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Beautiful morning for March, he said as Alexander approached. Almost feels like spring. Alexander didn't respond to the small talk. They descended into the station together, swiped their Metro cards, and moved toward the downtown platform. Mid-morning meant fewer people than rush hour, maybe 8 passengers scattered along the platform's length. Daniel kept up a stream of conversation about investor concerns and contract terms, but Alexander was watching his face more than listening to his words. He was blinking too much. His hand kept moving to his jacket pocket and away again. The smile he wore looked rehearsed. They walked toward the middle of the platform, away from other waiting passengers. Daniel guided them with subtle touches to Alexander's elbow, positioning them near the yellow warning strip at the edge. The digital sign updated next train 2 minutes. Is Sarah confirming these investors are legitimate? Alexander asked. Of course, she's with them now. They brought documentation. What are their names? I want to know who I'm meeting. Daniel paused just for a heartbeat. Henderson and I think Martinez. Sarah has the details. You didn't get their names. It happened fast. She's handling protocol. A distant rumble echoed from the tunnel. Alexander looked down the dark throat of the subway, seeing the first glow of approaching headlights. Daniel went quiet, checking his phone again. When Alexander glanced at him, his expression had changed subtly. Less animated, more focused. The platform began to vibrate. Wind pushed through the tunnel ahead of the train, stirring trash and debris across the concrete. Other passengers instinctively stepped back from the edge. Daniel stepped closer, positioning himself slightly behind and to Alexander's right. Where exactly in the building are they waiting? Alexander asked, turning slightly toward him. Conference room B, the large one. We don't have a conference room B. Daniel caught himself. Sorry, the large conference room. You know which one. The train's headlight brightened, the roar growing louder. Alexander turned to face Daniel directly, and what he saw in his expression stopped his breath. No warmth, no concern, just cold calculation, like he was solving an equation. What's really happening here? Daniel didn't answer. His hands came out of his pockets, empty palms facing Alexander. The train was close now, maybe 15 feet away, and closing fast. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously. Alexander saw everything with perfect clarity. Daniel's weight shifting onto his front foot, his arms beginning to extend, the determination in his eyes. Then his palms struck Alexander's back between his shoulder blades. Hard, violent, full body weight behind the shove. Alexander pitched forward, arms windmilling uselessly for balance. The platform edge disappeared beneath his feet. 4 feet of empty air, then the track bed rushing up to meet him. His knees hit first, pain registering but feeling distant. Then his hands slammed into gravel and concrete. The train's horn blared deafening. Its headlight filled his vision, blindingly bright. Through the glare, he could see the engineer's face in the window. Frozen in horror. No time to climb, no time to roll aside. The third rail glinted to his left. Instant death if touched. Pure instinct took over. Alexander dropped completely flat between the 2 running rails, pressing his face into the gravel, arms pinned tight to his sides, legs straight, every muscle locked rigid. He sucked in one last breath and held it. The train's front passed over him, inches from his back, then darkness. Complete, absolute darkness filled with a mechanical roar so loud it erased thought. Each car passing marked a rhythm. Thud, 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 thud. 8 cars, though he didn't count consciously, just survival, just the endless mental loop. Don't move, don't move, don't move. Dust and debris pelted his face and body. Oil dripped onto his back. The vibration was so intense, his internal organs felt shaken loose. Metal screamed against metal as the train's emergency brakes engaged. The smell of burning brake pads choked the air. Each second felt like hours. Under all that weight and noise and darkness, he thought, this is how I die, crushed because of money, because of greed. But he wasn't dying, not yet. The train was slowing, the rhythm changing, the roar decreasing. Finally it stopped. The silence after was profound. His ears rang. His entire body shook uncontrollably. Alexander lay there for maybe 5 seconds, maybe 50. Time had lost meaning. Then he shifted slightly, testing. Everything still worked. He opened his eyes, saw light ahead between cars, crawled forward on his belly, moving slowly because his legs felt disconnected from his brain. He reached the emergency ladder between cars and pulled himself up, using mostly arm strength. A transit worker reached down. Alexander waved him off and finished climbing alone. He stood on the platform, covered head to toe in black grime. His clothes were torn, oil-stained gray with dust. Blood seeped through his torn pants at the knees. He looked like he'd crawled through a coal mine. Daniel stood frozen 20 feet away, his face showing not relief but calculation. Behind him, Rachel burst through the crowd breathless, her arrival timing too perfect to be coincidence. Dad? Oh no, what Wesley? What happened? Her face showed shock, but her eyes showed something else entirely. Not relief, frustration. Other passengers surrounded Alexander, voices overlapping. Are you okay? Someone call an ambulance. See? I saw someone push him. No, he fell. He just fell. Alexander ignored them all. He walked directly toward Daniel and Rachel, his steps deliberate despite the shaking in his legs. Other passengers parted for him. He stopped 2 feet from them, close enough to see their pupils dilate, close enough to watch their masks slip for one crucial second. They'd wanted him dead. His daughter, his son-in-law, they'd planned this coordinated timing, positioned themselves, and now they were disappointed. He'd survived. A transit officer approached. Sir, what happened? Did you fall? Alexander kept his eyes locked on Daniel. I was pushed. Pushed by who? Daniel stepped forward quickly. He stumbled. I tried to grab him but couldn't reach. He pushed me, deliberately. That's insane. Daniel's voice took on injured innocence. Why would I? He's confused, officer. The trauma. Alexander studied them both for a long moment. Rachel couldn't hold his gaze. Daniel held it too long, too steady, overcompensating. Around them, more officers arrived. Passengers gave statements. Someone called for paramedics. Alexander spoke quietly, but every word landed with absolute certainty. I'll see you in court. Then he turned and walked toward the station exit, leaving them with the officers. Behind him, Daniel called out, Alexander, wait, this is a misunderstanding. Alexander didn't turn, didn't respond, just kept walking 1 foot in front of the other until he reached the stairs and climbed toward daylight and air and the rest of his life. The moment Daniel's hand struck his back, time fractured. Alexander felt the pressure between his shoulder blades, felt his body pitch forward into empty space, felt gravity claim him with indifferent finality. No, no, no. The track bed rushed up. His knees hit first, sending white lightning through his legs. But pain didn't matter because the train was right there. Headlight blazing, horn screaming, metal beast bearing down at 30 miles. 10 feet away, 8, 6, lie flat. He saw the third rail to his left. That innocent-looking bar carrying enough electricity to stop his heart instantly. Death on his left, death bearing down from above. Survival only in the 18-inch gap between the running rails. Center, stay center. His hands hit gravel. He rolled briefly onto his back. Saw the train's undercarriage, mechanical guts, and grinding wheels in oil-streaked metal. Flipped back to his stomach, arms pinned to sides, legs straight, face turned sideways against the track bed, creating the smallest profile possible. The train's front passed over him. Then darkness swallowed everything. The roar erased thought, erased identity, erased everything except the primal mantra. Don't move. Don't move. Don't breathe. Don't exist. The undercarriage was inches from his back. He felt its heat, smelled burning oil, tasted metal dust. Each car's passage marked itself. Thud, 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 thud. Debris pelted his face. Something wet, oil or brake fluid dripped onto his neck. The vibration rattled his teeth, shook his organs, seemed to loosen the joints of his skeleton. How many cars? How long? How much longer? His lungs burned for air, but he kept his mouth clamped shut, breathing in tiny sips through gritted teeth. His hands clutched gravel, not for physical stability, but for psychological anchor. Something real. Something that proved he still existed. The train was braking. Alexander felt it through the rails pressed against his sides. Metal screaming against metal, the smell of burning brake pads mixing with oil and dust and his own sweat. The rhythm changed. The roar decreased incrementally, then stopped. Complete silence after mechanical chaos. His ears rang so loudly the silence seemed louder than the train had been. He lay frozen, afraid that moving would somehow restart everything, that the train would surge forward and crush him after all. Test the body one limb at a time. Fingers curled, toes flexed, arms shifted, legs bent slightly at the knees. Everything still worked. He was whole. He was alive. My son-in-law tried to kill me. Alexander opened his eyes. Ahead, maybe 15 feet, he saw light between cars. He crawled toward it on his belly, pulling himself forward with his elbows because his legs had turned to water. The distance felt infinite. Finally, he reached the emergency ladder and grabbed the lowest rung. "Don't move. Stay there." "We're coming," a transit worker's voice from above. "I'm coming to you." Alexander's voice came out hoarse, scraped, raw. He pulled himself up using mostly arm strength. His legs shook so badly they could barely support weight. Hand over hand, rung by rung, he climbed back to the platform. The transit worker reached to help. Alexander waved him off and finished alone, hauling himself over the edge and standing on legs that trembled like a newborn colt's. The platform was chaos. Passengers clustered in knots, voices overlapping. "Did you see?" Someone pushed him. "No, he fell. Call an ambulance." Alexander stood there brushing ineffectually at his clothes, leaving black streaks on his hands. His business suit was destroyed, torn at knees and elbows, soaked with oil and track grime. His face felt caked with dust. When he touched his cheek, his fingers came away black. Then he saw Daniel. He stood 20 feet away, frozen in place, his face a mask of false concern that didn't reach his eyes. Their gazes locked. For one unguarded second, Alexander saw through him completely. Not worry, not relief, calculation. He was already building his story, already preparing his defense. "Dad." Rachel burst through the crowd, her coat flying open, hair disheveled. She grabbed his arm. Alexander pulled away sharply. Her arrival was too convenient. She was supposed to be at the office or home or anywhere but here. Yet here she stood breathless at the exact moment to play concerned daughter. "Oh my, what happened, Daniel? What happened?" The performance was skilled. Her voice pitched perfectly between shock and concern, but her eyes betrayed her. When she looked at Alexander, truly looked at him before remembering to school her expression, he saw frustration, not relief. They'd wanted him dead. The realization crystallized with perfect clarity. This wasn't a sudden impulse by Daniel, a moment of rage. This was planned, coordinated. The urgent meeting fabrication, the traffic report he'd waited for, the specific platform position. Rachel's timed arrival to witness the tragic accident. A transit officer pushed through the crowd. "Sir, are you injured? What happened?" Alexander kept his eyes on Daniel. "I was pushed." "Pushed by who?" Daniel moved quickly, his voice taking on wounded innocence. "He stumbled. I tried to grab him but couldn't reach. The train was coming so fast. He pushed me." Alexander's voice was steady despite the adrenaline still flooding his system. "Deliberately." "That's insane." Daniel spread his hands in helpless confusion. "Why would I, officer?" He's confused. The trauma of what just happened. "You're here," Alexander said to Rachel. "How convenient. I was coming to meet you both. I just got here. I saw." She reached toward him again. Perfect timing. More officers arrived. Passengers offered contradictory accounts. "I saw someone behind him." "No, he was alone. I think he lost his balance." "Someone definitely pushed." The platform cameras had been experiencing intermittent issues. Daniel had probably arranged that too. Through all the chaos, Alexander stood perfectly still, studying the two people he'd loved most in the world. His daughter who'd chosen money over blood, his son-in-law who just tried to murder him in broad daylight. They stood together, physically close, united against him. The transformation that had been building since January reached completion in that moment. Not father, not boss, not victim, strategist, hunter, someone planning systematic destruction. Alexander walked toward them slowly. Officers and passengers formed a circle, watching. He stopped 2 feet away, close enough to see every micro-expression on their faces. Daniel's jaw was clenched. Rachel twisted her wedding ring. Both waited for his next move. Alexander looked at Daniel, then Rachel, then back to Daniel. He let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then he spoke quietly enough that they had to strain to hear. "I'll see you in court." He turned and walked toward the station exit. "Alexander, wait," Daniel called after him. "This is a misunderstanding. We need to talk about this." Alexander didn't turn, didn't acknowledge him, just walked with steady purpose toward the stairs. Each step taking him away from the platform and towards something new, something focused, something dangerous. Behind him, he heard officers asking Daniel and Rachel to stay for additional questions. Heard passengers still arguing about what they'd seen. Heard the general confusion that would make a criminal case nearly impossible to prove. But a criminal case wasn't what he was thinking about. Alexander climbed the stairs to street level and emerged into cold March sunlight. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage being contained. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts until he found the name he needed. William Blackwood, attorney. His finger hovered over the call button. This was the decision point. Call the attorney and everything changed. This became war. Total war. He pressed call. 3 rings. William Blackwood. William, it's Alexander Morgan. I need to see you immediately. My son-in-law just tried to kill me and I'm going to destroy him. Silence on the line. Then, come to my office. I'll clear my afternoon. Alexander hung up and started walking. His knees hurt. His back ached. He was covered in filth and probably looked deranged. But his mind had never been clearer. They wanted the company. They'd wanted him dead for it. Now he'd show them what it meant to fail at murder while revealing your true intentions. It took Alexander 30 years to build something real, and they wanted to take it from him. He'd spent his life creating. Now he would learn to dismantle with surgical precision. The emergency clinic took 40 minutes. A nurse cleaned the scrapes on Alexander's knees and temple, applied bandages, checked for concussion. The doctor asked how he'd gotten track debris in his hair. Alexander told him the truth. The doctor looked at him like he'd survived something impossible. You're lucky to be alive. I know. By early afternoon, Alexander sat across from William Blackwood in his Midtown office. His ruined suit had been replaced with clothes he kept in his gym locker, wrinkled but clean. William's desk was covered with police reports and witness statements. I'll be direct. William slid the first document toward Alexander. The criminal case is weak, very weak. Alexander picked up the police report. Platform cameras had experienced technical failure during the precise window of the incident. 6 witnesses present, 6 different stories. 3 saw him stumble. 2 thought they saw a possible push. 1 saw nothing at all. The cameras failed at exactly the right moment, Alexander said. That's not coincidence. I agree, but proving tampering, William shook his head. Nearly impossible, and without video evidence, Daniel's lawyer will destroy this in court. He'll say, you became dizzy from stress, that he tried to grab you but missed. So he walks away after trying to murder me. Criminally, probably. William leaned back in his chair. But there are other ways to seek justice, Mom. Alexander looked at him carefully. Which is, you mentioned suspicions about financial irregularities. Those leave trails. Paper doesn't lie like witnesses do. Understanding clicked into place. Go after him for fraud instead of attempted murder. Fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty. Much easier to prove, much harder to defend. William pulled out a legal pad, and it destroys him financially, not just criminally. I need evidence, documentation, transaction records. You're the owner. You have legal access to everything. William leaned forward. But you need him comfortable, not suspicious. Play the forgiving father. Let him think you are letting it go. The thought made Alexander's stomach turn, but the strategy was sound. How long will this take? Weeks, maybe a month, to gather everything. Hire forensic accountants, build an airtight case. He met Alexander's eyes. Can you do it? Live under the same roof as someone who tried to kill you? Alexander thought about lying between those subway rails, about the train passing inches over his back, about emerging to see disappointment on his daughter's face instead of relief. Yes, he said, I can do it. That evening, Alexander returned to the townhouse. His hands shook as he turned the key, but his expression remained neutral. Daniel and Rachel sat in the living room. They looked startled when he walked in. You're back, Daniel said carefully. Alexander set his briefcase down and sat in his usual armchair, reclaiming territory. I've had time to think about what happened, about us. Rachel leaned forward. And life's too short for family conflict. Maybe I did stumble. The stress lately, not sleeping well. The words tasted like poison, but he delivered them steadily. My attorney advised against pressing charges. Uncertain outcome tears family apart regardless. So you're saying, what exactly? Daniel's voice held suspicion. I'm saying we move forward. Put this behind us. I don't want to lose my daughter over an accident. Rachel started crying. She crossed the room and hugged him. Alexander endured it briefly, then stepped back, maintaining distance. Daniel watched him with calculating eyes, trying to determine if this was genuine. Just like that, you forgive everything. Alexander met his gaze steadily. I didn't say that. I said we move forward. They didn't trust his sudden change of heart. He could see it in their eyes, but they wanted to believe it. Their relief was obvious. They thought they'd won. Alexander let them think it. Over the next 2 weeks, he worked from his home office late into the night. At 2:00 a.m., the house was silent, except for the hum of his computer. He pulled up 5 years of financial records, scrolling through expense reports and vendor payments. There it was, Meridian Medical Supplies. Recurring payments every month, amounts ranging from $3,000 to $8,000. He opened their vendor contracts folder. No agreement with any company by that name. He looked up the business registration, formed in Delaware in 2021, address listed as a UPS store in Newark. He opened the banking portal and traced wire transfers. The destination account was in the Cayman Islands. The account holder name included Harrison. Amateur mistake. A floorboard creaked outside his office. Alexander minimized the windows quickly. Daniel appeared in the doorway, hair disheveled. Working late. Couldn't sleep. Daniel gestured at the screen displaying harmless quarterly reports. Going over numbers? Why now? You never cared about details before. Nearly dying changes perspective. Makes you want things organized. Daniel stepped into the room, eyes scanning Alexander's desk. You're looking for something. Should I be? He paused, then shook his head. Of course not. Just seems odd, the timing. Go back to bed, Daniel. This doesn't concern you. He left muttering, everything in this company concerns me. Alexander waited until Daniel's footsteps faded, then opened the files again. He spent the rest of the night documenting everything, taking photos with his phone, creating an external hard drive labeled Estate Planning Docs to avoid suspicion. By morning, he had proof of 42 months of fraudulent payments totaling $250,000. The next day, Alexander contacted Sentinel Financial, a forensic accounting firm. He met with Jennifer Burke in a conference room downtown, sliding a USB drive across the table. Complete financial records, 5 years. I need comprehensive review of all expenses over $1,000. She nodded, professional and efficient. Preparing for acquisition, due diligence. Something like that. Pay particular attention to vendor payments. Understanding passed between them without words. She knew what to look for. At breakfast the following morning, Alexander made the announcement. I've hired Sentinel Financial, forensic accountants. Daniel's coffee mug paused midair. Why, what for? Routine audit. Should have been doing them annually anyway. Rachel frowned. Is this because of what happened? You don't trust us. It's because I almost died and realized I've been sloppy with compliance. Nothing personal. What exactly will they be auditing? Daniel's voice was carefully casual, but Alexander saw his hand shake slightly. Everything. 5 years of transactions, vendor relationships, expense approvals. Alexander met his eyes. I'll need you to provide full access to your approval records. Of course. Happy to cooperate. While Daniel's face remained composed, Alexander noticed how his jaw tightened, the subtle flaring of his nostrils. Panic hidden behind professional calm. He was scrambling now, wondering what could be found, what could be hidden in time. That afternoon, Alexander met secretly with Sarah Chen in a cafe 6 blocks from the office. She'd been his operations director for a decade, brilliant and unwaveringly loyal. I need to trust someone, Alexander said, and you're the only one. Sarah's dark eyes studied him carefully. What's happening, Alexander? There are rumors. He told her everything. The overheard conversation, the financial irregularities, the subway incident, his plan. When he finished, Sarah sat perfectly still. I always thought Daniel was ambitious. I never imagined this. Will you help me? She didn't hesitate. What do you need? I'm restructuring the company. I need someone I trust to run the new entity. Alexander outlined his plan. 6 clinics would transfer to a new company, Morgan Medical Solutions. Sarah would serve as chief operating officer. The remaining 4 clinics, mostly underperforming ones, would stay with Morgan Health Systems under Daniel and Rachel. Can you prepare financial projections for both entities discreetly? Consider it done. She paused. They'll fight this, you know. Let them. The law's on my side. Their coffee grew cold as they discussed logistics. 2 hours of careful planning, speaking in low voices. Alexander felt lighter when he left, having shared his burden. Back at the office, Daniel was waiting for him. We need to discuss something. Daniel closed Alexander's office door. United Healthcare is concerned about our compliance program. Alexander kept his expression neutral. Oh, they've heard rumors about our audit. It's making them nervous. Transparency makes providers nervous. Alexander raised an eyebrow. Interesting perspective. Daniel leaned against the credenza. You know how these insurance companies are. Any hint of irregularities, they start looking for exit clauses. There are no irregularities unless you know something I don't. Of course not. Too quick. I'm just concerned about perception. Maybe we should delay the audit just until contract renewal season passes. Alexander smiled thinly. The audit continues as scheduled. He watched Daniel's face for that flicker of panic, the micro-expression revealing his fear. There it was gone in an instant, replaced by professional composure. Your call. I hope it doesn't backfire. Daniel left, closing the door too firmly behind him. Alexander waited until his footsteps faded, then called William Blackwood. He's worried about the audit, wants it delayed. Good, William said. That's very good. It means he knows there's something to find. 3 weeks later, late April sliding into May, Alexander sat alone in his car near the office. His phone rang. Jennifer Burke from Sentinel Financial. Mr. Morgan, we need to meet today. I found something. Alexander looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. He smiled. Not a large smile, just a slight curve of satisfaction. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He started the car and pulled into traffic. The evidence he needed was ready. Phase 1 was complete. Jennifer Burke spread documents across the conference table in her firm's office. Financial reports, wire transfer records, corporate filings. It's worse than we thought. She pointed to a highlighted section. Meridian Medical Supplies is just the beginning. Daniel Harrison created 5 different shell companies. All followed the same pattern: Delaware incorporation, minimal documentation, payments for unspecified services. Alexander studied the papers. Total amount, $467,000 over 3 years. We've traced it to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Belize, all ultimately controlled by Daniel. And Rachel. Her signature appears on some approvals but less frequently. She may have been signing without reviewing, or she knew and was less careful. Alexander's jaw tightened. She knew. Jennifer nodded. The documentation is conclusive. I've prepared everything for potential legal action. She slid a thick folder across the table. The complete report. Alexander picked it up, feeling its weight. How quickly can you prepare expert testimony? Give me 2 weeks. Alexander left with the folder under his arm. Evidence of theft, evidence of betrayal, evidence that would destroy Daniel Harrison's career and possibly send him to prison. He was driving back to the office when his phone rang. Sarah Chen. We have a problem. Daniel's here with 2 attorneys. They're reviewing all our contracts and organizational documents. Alexander gripped the steering wheel tighter. When did they arrive? 20 minutes ago. They're demanding access to everything. Corporate bylaws, ownership structure, board minutes. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Stall them. Alexander found them in the main conference room. Daniel sat at the head of the table, Alexander's usual position. 2 men in expensive suits flanked him. Files and laptops covered the surface. What's going on here? Alexander stood in the doorway. Daniel smiled, too confident. Just getting some professional advice. Meet James Volkov and Michael Peters. My legal team. Alexander walked to the table. Legal team for what purpose? Volkov, gray-haired and hawk-faced, spoke first. Mr. Harrison has concerns about certain management decisions. We're reviewing corporate governance to ensure compliance with fiduciary responsibilities. Fiduciary responsibilities. Alexander repeated the words carefully. That's an interesting choice of focus. Daniel leaned forward. I'm concerned about the direction of the company, the unnecessary audit, the constant questioning of my decisions. It creates an unstable environment for our operations. My company, my audit, my prerogative. The board might disagree. The board is advisory only. I hold 100% equity. Or did your lawyers forget to mention that? The second attorney, Peters, younger and more aggressive, pushed a document forward. We're preparing a petition for emergency injunctive relief, alleging breach of fiduciary duty and elder abuse. Alexander felt cold rage building. Elder abuse. Your erratic behavior since the subway incident. Paranoia, unfounded accusations. Your medical records show head trauma. We're requesting court-ordered psychological evaluation. Alexander looked at Daniel, really looked at him. Saw the smug satisfaction beneath the professional veneer. Daniel thought he'd found his leverage. I see. Alexander's voice was ice. Then I suppose I should prepare my response. Sarah, please escort these gentlemen to the visitor area. They can continue their review there. This room is needed for actual company business. Daniel stood. This isn't over, Alexander. You have no idea how right you are. In the hallway, Alexander called William Blackwood. They're going nuclear. Legal team injunction, elder abuse allegations. They want a psychological evaluation. Not surprising. William sounded calm. We expected this. How's the restructuring plan coming? Almost ready. Sarah has the financials prepared. The legal documentation is with your team. Good. Let's accelerate the timeline. Meeting tomorrow, 9:00 a.m., my office. Bring Sarah and the audit results. That night, Alexander didn't return to the townhouse. He called Rachel to say he was staying at a hotel. Her voice was tight, defensive. Daniel's just trying to protect the company. You haven't been yourself since the accident. Is that what you're telling yourself? Alexander kept his tone even. That your husband is protecting the company by suing your father? You're not being reasonable. The audit, the secrecy, the accusations. We'll talk tomorrow, Rachel, after I've met with my legal team. He hung up before she could respond. In his hotel room, Alexander spread the audit documents across the bed. Evidence of systematic theft. Evidence that would destroy Daniel Harrison. Evidence that would force Rachel to choose sides once and for all. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Found more. Daniels have been approaching our insurance partners, telling them you're stepping down due to health concerns. 3 have requested meetings to discuss the transition. Alexander wasn't surprised. Daniel was trying to create his narrative, make Alexander's departure seem inevitable. Create enough doubt and confusion that when the restructuring was announced, it would look like the desperate act of a failing man. Alexander texted back, perfect. More evidence of his duplicity. See you tomorrow. He slept soundly that night for the first time in weeks. The clarity of purpose, the certainty of his path forward brought peace. Let Daniel think he was winning. The trap was already set. The conference room on the 35th floor felt different now. This was where Alexander had overheard Daniel and Rachel scheming back in January, where everything had started. 4 months later, he sat at the head of the table in the same room, about to end everything they'd planned for. 9 o'clock Tuesday morning, early May, bright sunlight through the windows. Sarah Chen sat to his right. She'd been briefed. Robert Park and Margaret Foster, senior directors, flanked the opposite side, both understanding what was coming. Daniel and Rachel sat across from him, still believing this was a routine quarterly board review. The 2 attorneys from yesterday were notably absent. Daniel had wanted to appear conciliatory, not combative, a strategic mistake. Alexander distributed bound documents to each person. The cover page read, Confidential Restructuring Proposal. Daniel's expression shifted from boredom to sharp attention as he read the title. Beside him, Rachel flipped to the index, confusion spreading across her face. I've made decisions about the company's future structure. Alexander's voice was formal, a cold business announcement, not family discussion. Let me finish before questions. Daniel started to interrupt. Alexander held up one hand. Daniel closed his mouth, the jaw clenched. Effective immediately, I've formed a new entity, Morgan Medical Solutions, LLC. 6 clinics will transfer to this new company, Upper East Side, Midtown Financial District, Brooklyn Heights, Queens Central, and Bronx North. Alexander turned to page 3. These locations represent approximately 70% of total revenue. He watched Daniel's face darken as he processed the implications. Major insurance contracts will move to Morgan Medical Solutions, United Healthcare, Aetna Blue Cross. Sarah Chen will serve as Chief Operating Officer of the new entity. Sarah nodded, once confirming. The original company, Morgan Health Systems, will retain 4 locations and existing vendor relationships. Daniel and Rachel, your positions remain with Morgan Health Systems. Daniel stood so fast his chair tipped backward, clattering against the floor. You can't do this. This is sabotage, illegal asset stripping. It's completely legal. Robert Park slid a document across the table. Legal opinion attached. Mr. Morgan owns 100% of company equity. He has absolute right to restructure. I'll sue injunction against asset transfer, emergency board vote. Margaret Foster interrupted calmly. The board is advisory only. No voting power. This restructuring is entirely within ownership rights. Daniel's face flushed dark red. He leaned over the table, jabbing his finger at the documents. That company was promised to us. Your inheritance governs after death. I'm alive. Alexander remained seated, hands flat on the table. I can restructure as I wish. Rachel started crying. She reached across the table, trying to grasp Alexander's hand. He pulled back, maintaining physical distance. Daddy, please don't do this to us. We're family. Family tried to kill me, remember? That was an accident. You said you forgave us. I said we'd move forward. This is moving forward separately. Daniel pounded his fist on the table, making water glasses jump. There's nothing left. Those clinics barely break even. Then you'll need to manage efficiently. Alexander checked his watch, dismissive. Good practice. How are we supposed to survive on that? Rachel's voice rose, tears streaming. Alexander met her eyes directly. The same way I survived lying between subway rails. Figure it out. Daniel grabbed the documents and stormed out, Rachel following. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the frame. Sarah exhaled slowly. That took courage. It took math. Numbers don't lie about who's been stealing. Alexander gathered his materials. We'll finalize transfer logistics this afternoon. I want everything operational within 2 weeks. That evening, Alexander returned to the townhouse for the last time as a resident. He moved through rooms, methodically packing only what belonged solely to him. Clothes from his closet, leaving Rachel's things untouched. Documents from the safe. Photos of young Rachel before Daniel, leaving wedding pictures where they hung. Daniel found him in the master bedroom, suitcase open on the bed. You're kicking us out. Your own daughter, Alexander folded a shirt precisely. My house, my decision. 30 days is legally required notice. He handed Daniel an envelope. Daniel ripped it open, read the eviction notice. Where are we supposed to go? Not my concern. Find an apartment. Use your salary from Morgan Health Systems. What salary? Without those contracts, there's no revenue for payroll. Alexander placed the eviction notice on the dresser, then cut expenses, prioritized basic management. Rachel appeared in the doorway. I can't believe you're doing this. Alexander didn't look up from packing. I can't believe you stood on that platform and smiled while I almost died. She had no response to that. They both watched as Alexander carried boxes downstairs and loaded them into his car trunk. He took his house keys off the key ring and placed them on the kitchen counter. Daniel blocked the doorway briefly. Alexander walked past without breaking stride. The apartment in Murray Hill was sparse. 3 flights up, 1 bedroom, unfurnished except for a single chair he bought that morning. Alexander carried boxes up the stairs alone, setting them in neat rows along the wall. He opened the blinds. Different view than the townhouse. No garden, no privacy, but unobstructed. Honest. Alexander sat in the chair eating takeout dinner while his phone buzzed repeatedly with calls and texts from Rachel. He ignored them all. The apartment echoed when he walked. Empty space felt cleaner than filled rooms contaminated by betrayal. 10 days passed. The new company operated smoothly. Sarah ran daily operations while Alexander focused on strategic planning. The old company struggled exactly as intended. Daniel made desperate calls to vendors trying to negotiate better terms with no leverage. Rachel worked late trying to balance budgets that wouldn't balance. Alexander was in his new office reviewing financial projections with Sarah when his assistant knocked. Mr. Morgan, there's a process server here. Legal documents for you. The envelope was thick. Alexander opened it, standing in the doorway. Daniel and Rachel had filed lawsuit challenging the restructuring, seeking injunction, claiming breach of fiduciary duty and elder abuse. 15 pages of allegations arguing Alexander was mentally incompetent, acting maliciously, violating implied promises. Alexander read the entire complaint without sitting down. When he finished, he looked at Sarah. They're fighting back. What do we do? Alexander allowed himself a slight smile, the first genuine one in weeks. We counterattack. Get William on the phone. She reached for her cell immediately. Alexander walked to the window, looking out at Manhattan, stretching in all directions. Daniel thought this was about the company, about money and control and inheritance. He still didn't understand. This wasn't about business. This was about accountability, about making sure people who try to murder you for profit lose everything they wanted from your death. The lawsuit was expected, even welcome. It opened the door for discovery, for depositions, for putting everything on public record. They'd filed first thinking aggression would intimidate him. They just made a serious mistake. William spread the lawsuit across his conference table. 47 pages of accusations, each more absurd than the last. Alexander sat across from him, reading sections, occasionally shaking his head. They're claiming you made oral promises to transfer the business. William highlighted a passage with yellow marker. Can they prove it? No, because I never promised immediate transfer, only inheritance after death. The competency angle is more concerning. William flipped to page 32. They're requesting court-ordered psychological evaluations citing erratic behavior post-trauma, your document gathering afterward, which they're calling paranoid, the restructuring, which they're calling impulsive revenge. Alexander looked up sharply. Based on what? The subway incident. Your behavior since. They filed affidavits from employees claiming you've been unstable and obsessive. Who signed these? 2 clinic directors, both from locations remaining with the old company. Alexander nodded, understanding. Daniel had leveraged loyalty through fear. Typical. I'll take their tests, pass every one. That's the plan, but it means weeks of appointments, multiple doctors, legal costs mounting while we wait for results. William pulled out a calculator. Volkov and Associates bills aggressively, figure $40,000 monthly just defending against their motions. The number didn't shock Alexander. He'd expected financial warfare. Bill me, I'm not settling. Emergency hearing in 1 week. They're requesting immediate injunction to halt all business operations pending trial. Alexander leaned back in his chair. They won't get it. I own the company. No shareholders to protect. Agreed, but we have to show up, argue, respond to every motion they file. Each appearance costs $8,000 to $15,000. William closed the document. They're counting on financial pressure, forcing negotiation. Let them count. The following week brought the first court appearance. Alexander sat at one table, Daniel and Rachel at another 20 feet away. They didn't speak, didn't acknowledge each other beyond cold assessment when the judge entered. Daniel's attorney argued Alexander was destroying company value through malicious restructuring. William countered that ownership rights were absolute. No shareholders existed to harm. The judge reviewed documents for 20 minutes, then struck his gavel. Motion for injunction denied. Plaintiff has not demonstrated likelihood of success on merits. Next hearing, July 8th. Small victory, but victories cost money. That hearing alone, $12,000 in legal fees. The court did grant one request, comprehensive psychological evaluation. 3 appointments scheduled over 2 weeks. Cognitive testing, psychiatric interview, neurological examination. Dr. Patricia Hoffman's office first appointment. Alexander sat at a computer clicking through pattern recognition puzzles, reciting number sequences, backward solving logic problems. The tests were straightforward, almost insultingly simple. Excellent cognitive function, Dr. Hoffman noted. No signs of impairment. The psychiatric evaluation proved equally pointless. Dr. Ramirez asked about the subway incident, about Alexander's business decisions, about family relationships. How did nearly dying affect your mental state? It clarified my priorities, showed me who I could trust. Some might interpret your business decisions as retaliatory. Some might interpret attempted murder as motive to protect assets from criminals. Dr. Ramirez made notes without expression. Your cognitive function appears excellent. I see no signs of diminished capacity. The neurological examination completed the trilogy. Brain scans, reflex tests, coordination assessments, all normal. The court-appointed evaluators report no evidence of psychological impairment or diminished decision-making capacity. Meanwhile, Daniel was destroying what remained of the old company. Desperate to cut costs, he fired 40% of staff. Clinic hallways echoed empty. Patient care quality plummeted. Local healthcare newsletters began running stories about the crisis. Daniel also tried recruiting employees from Morgan Medical Solutions. Sarah Chen received his call and told him exactly where to go. Others remained loyal as well. Daniel's reputation preceded him now. Nobody wanted to work for someone under federal investigation. June became a marathon of court appearances, discovery motions, scheduling conferences, document production disputes. Daniel's attorneys demanded internal communications trying to prove malicious intent. William provided only what was legally required, nothing more. Each hearing meant another day in court, another legal bill. By month's end, Alexander had spent $87,000 defending against meritless claims. Late June evening, he sat alone in his office reviewing the mounting costs. Discovery requests piled on his desk, Daniel demanding hundreds of documents, each requiring attorney review time. More fees, more delays. Sarah knocked on his door. "You look exhausted. When did you last take a day off?" When the lawsuit stopped coming. She sat across from him, concern evident. "Is this legal battle worth your health?" "They tried to kill me. Yes, it's worth everything. What if they win? What if the court sides with them?" Alexander pulled open his desk drawer and touched the folder inside. "Bone. They won't. I have something they don't know about yet. The audit. The audit. 2 more weeks of their attacks. Then I end this." Alexander's phone buzzed. William's name appeared. He answered on speaker. "3 new motions filed today. We need to discuss response strategy." Sarah stood to leave. Alexander gestured for her to stay and pulled out his calendar. The first week of July was marked for strategy, meeting the same week the final audit report was due. "Schedule it," Alexander told William, "and make sure Jennifer Burke can attend. It's time to deploy phase 2. He hung up and looked at the folder on his desk. Inside was the preliminary audit summary. 467,000 in documented theft, shell companies, offshore transfers, Daniel's signature on every fraudulent transaction. Let them file motions. Let them attack Alexander's competency. Let them drain resources they didn't have. The counterpunch was coming. The first week of July arrived. Alexander sat in William's office for their strategy session, reviewing the status of various motions. William's assistant knocked and entered carrying a thick package. The forensic audit final report just arrived by courier. Alexander took the bound document. The cover page read, "Confidential Forensic Audit, Morgan Health Systems, Evidence of Systematic Fraud." He opened to the executive summary. Jennifer Burke's work was meticulous. 347 pages of evidence. Bank statements, wire transfers, email communications, shell company formation documents showing Daniel as beneficial owner, timeline spanning 38 months, total documented theft 467,000, every fraudulent transaction traced and verified, every approval bearing Daniel's digital signature, every wire transfer ending in his offshore account. Alexander looked at William. "How fast can we get this filed?" William leaned forward, energized. "Court 24 hours. SEC and IRS, I can have it on their desks by tomorrow afternoon." Alexander closed the report with decisive finality. "Do it." We wove them simultaneously. William smiled, the first genuine smile Alexander had seen from him in weeks. "Now we're playing offense." 48 hours after filing the audit evidence, everything changed. William submitted the report as an exhibit in the civil lawsuit, immediately becoming public record. Simultaneously, copies went to the SEC Division of Enforcement and IRS Criminal Investigation Division. The evidence package was comprehensive. 347 pages of financial records, bank statements, wire transfer documentation, shell company formation, documents showing Daniel as beneficial owner, email communications between Daniel and fictitious vendors sent by Daniel to himself, creating paper trail for fake invoices. The pattern was clear. Daniel approved invoices from Meridian Medical Supplies and 4 other shell companies for non-existent medical equipment. Funds wired to offshore accounts. Account holder traced to Daniel's family trust. Systematic theft over 38 months, totaling 467,000. Within 72 hours, both agencies opened formal investigations. Mid-July morning, Alexander was reviewing quarterly projections when Sarah knocked urgently. "You need to see this." She handed him her tablet showing a breaking news alert. Federal probe NYC medical clinic owner accused of $467K embezzlement. Alexander scrolled through the article. Healthcare Business Journal had obtained copies of the public court filing. The story detailed everything: the audit findings, the shell companies, Daniel's systematic fraud. Quotes from sources close to the investigation. Likely prosecutors building public case. "The media found it fast," Sarah observed. "Good. Let everyone see what he is." Alexander's phone buzzed. William calling. "Federal agents are at Morgan Health Systems right now. SEC investigator Marcus Chen and IRS criminal investigation agent Rebecca Torres. They're seizing records." Alexander stood walking to his window. Across town, Daniel's world was collapsing. At the old company office, Daniel sat at his desk reviewing termination paperwork when the lobby receptionist called. "There are federal agents here to see you." Before he could respond, his office door opened. Marcus Chen and Rebecca Torres entered, showing credentials. "Daniel Harrison." Chen extended a subpoena. "We need immediate access to all financial records, computers, and communications." Daniel's face drained of color. "What is this about?" "Financial fraud investigation. Your office is sealed pending forensic analysis." Torres gestured to its specialists entering behind them. "We'll need you to answer some questions." For 4 hours they questioned him. Daniel denied knowledge, claimed accounting errors, insisted he had no connection to offshore accounts. His attorney arrived mid-interview and advised him to stop talking. "We didn't mention offshore accounts," Torres noted. "How did you know about them?" Daniel realized his mistake. "I want my attorney present before answering anything else." The same day, agents visited Rachel at her apartment in Queens. She answered the door in sweatpants, face drawn from stress. Seeing the badges, her legs buckled. Torres caught her elbow, helping her to the kitchen table. They showed her documents bearing her signature approving fraudulent expenses as CFO. "I didn't know." Rachel's voice rose to near hysteria. "Daniel said they were normal expenses. I just signed what he told me to sign." "That's a defense for trial," Chen said evenly. "Right now, you're a person of interest in a criminal investigation. Can I make a deal, testify against him?" Torres exchanged glances with Chen. "That's not our decision. The U.S. Attorney's Office handles cooperation agreements, but you should retain counsel immediately." 2 days later, Daniel tried using an ATM. Transaction denied. He called his bank on hold for 15 minutes. "Mr. Harrison, your account has been frozen pending federal investigation." He checked his phone banking app, all accounts showing zero available balance. The offshore Cayman account also frozen through international law enforcement coordination. Total accessible assets, nothing. His credit cards were maxed from civil litigation costs. He couldn't pay rent, couldn't pay his criminal defense attorney's retainer. Rachel faced identical financial paralysis. Her accounts frozen. Her signature on fraudulent documents, making her a potential co-conspirator. The media firestorm intensified. New York Post ran healthcare heir accused of bilking father's business. The articles detailed everything. The subway incident, the restructuring battle, the fraud discovery. Professional networks discussed the scandal endlessly. Insurance partners began distancing themselves from Morgan Health Systems. Daniel's professional reputation was destroyed overnight. A Google search of his name returned nothing but scandal coverage. Volkov Daniels' civil attorney contacted Williams seeking settlement. A conference call was arranged. All parties, all attorneys. "My clients want to discuss resolution," Volkov began. "They're prepared to withdraw all litigation, resign from company positions, surrender future inheritance claims." William presented the proposal to Alexander. He rejected it immediately. "No deal. Criminal prosecution continues regardless." "Mr. Morgan," Volkov's voice carried desperation, "my clients could face significant prison time. Surely some mercy." "I had mercy lying between subway rails." Alexander's voice was flat, emotionless. "None left." Daniel's voice came through the speaker. "Alexander, please, I made mistakes, but prison for accounting errors." "Accounting errors? You stole $467,000. You tried to kill me. Call it what it is." Rachel started crying audibly. "Daddy, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please help me." "You stood on that platform. You smiled. No settlement, no mercy. We're done here." Alexander disconnected. William stayed on briefly to formalize the rejection, then hung up as well. "They're panicking," he observed. "They should be. What's the timeline on federal charges?" "Grand jury likely within 60 days. Prosecutors are moving fast. Your evidence made their case easy." William consulted his notes. "Wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion. Daniel's looking at 10 to 15 years potentially." "And Rachel?" "Depends if she cooperates. If she testifies against Daniel, she might get immunity." "That's between her and prosecutors." William studied Alexander carefully. "You're not troubled by the possibility of your daughter facing prison. She's an adult. She made choices." Alexander met his gaze steadily. "If she testifies truthfully, that's her decision. I won't interfere either way. That evening, Alexander's phone rang. Healthcare Business Journal reporter. Mr. Morgan, can you comment on the federal investigation of your son-in-law? I'm cooperating fully with authorities. The evidence speaks for itself. Some say this is revenge for a family dispute. This is about financial crimes. The audit uncovered systematic fraud. I reported it to appropriate authorities. No further comment. Alexander hung up and ignored subsequent calls. Let the media draw their own conclusions from public records. Late July, Alexander received a text from William. U.S. Attorney's Office scheduled meeting tomorrow. They want to discuss your cooperation and timeline for charges. Daniel's attorney contacted them about plea negotiations. Alexander typed back, I'll be there, no deals that include leniency. He put the phone down and looked at his calendar. A date in August was circled. Court decision on the restructuring case. Everything was converging. Criminal charges, civil case resolution, company implosion, all happening within weeks of each other. Alexander stood and walked to the window. The city stretched out below, lights beginning to flicker on as darkness settled. Somewhere out there, Daniel and Rachel were watching their lives disintegrate. Bank accounts frozen, criminal charges imminent, professional reputations destroyed. They'd wanted to take his life and his company. Now they had nothing, and this was just the beginning. The end game was visible now, inevitable as sunrise. Everything Alexander had built over 30 years was being carefully dismantled and separated from the criminals who tried to steal it. The plan was executing perfectly. Early August morning, Alexander sat in the courtroom waiting for Judge Whitmore to enter. Daniel and Rachel occupied the defense table 20 feet away. Daniel looked diminished. Weight loss, poor grooming, exhaustion etched into his face. Rachel sat at the far end of the table, physical distance between them symbolic. She hadn't lived with him for 2 weeks. The bailiff called them to rise. Judge Whitmore entered, carrying a thick folder. They sat. She began distributing copies of her written opinion, 25 pages. This court has reviewed extensive evidence and legal arguments from both parties. Her voice carried through the silent room. Plaintiffs claim defendant restructured company in breach of oral promises. Evidence supporting such promises? None, she continued methodically. Defendant possesses clear legal authority as sole owner to restructure business as he determines appropriate. Plaintiffs' competency challenge medical evaluations show defendant functioning at superior cognitive levels. Daniel's shoulders sagged further with each sentence. This lawsuit appears motivated by anger over legitimate business decisions rather than genuine legal injury. All claims dismissed with prejudice. The gavel strike echoed sharply. Plaintiffs will reimburse defendants' legal costs totaling $125,000. This matter is concluded. Alexander gathered his documents methodically. No celebration, just completion. William shook his hand briefly, professional satisfaction. Daniel remained seated as the courtroom emptied, staring at the table. Alexander walked out without looking back. 3 days later, Daniel received a call from the remaining Morgan Health Systems board members. Emergency meeting required. He arrived at the conference room to find 3 grim faces and a prepared resignation letter already on the table. Daniel, the board unanimously agrees your resignation is necessary, Thompson said. I haven't been charged with anything. Daniel's voice lacked conviction. Investigation doesn't mean guilt. Your presence creates liability exposure. Insurance won't cover executives under federal investigation. The argument was brief. Daniel signed. Security escorted him out his belongings in a cardboard box. Rachel resigned the same day via email, not even entering the building. Without leadership or viable contracts, Morgan Health Systems revenue collapsed. Couldn't make payroll for remaining 30 employees. Landlords demanded back rent. Medical supply vendors refused deliveries. Insurance partners canceled contracts, citing quality concerns. The company attorney filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Liquidation, not reorganization. Assets sold to pay creditors. Equipment, furniture, patient records transferred to other providers. News coverage ran headlines about the shuttered business, the fraud scandal, the spectacular failure. Everything Alexander had built over 30 years erased within months by Daniel's mismanagement and theft. But that had been the point, hadn't it? Separate what was valuable from what was infected. Morgan Medical Solutions thrived. The old shell collapsed under its own corruption. Alexander listed the Upper East Side townhouse through a premier agency. Property valued at $4, 2 million sold within 3 weeks to a hedge fund executive paying cash. Daniel and Rachel received their final notice. They'd been living there without paying rent, technically squatting. The last week of August, moving day arrived. Alexander sent a representative. He didn't need to be there personally. Movers packed items Alexander had selected. Daniel and Rachel hastily loaded their belongings into a rented truck while neighbors watched from windows. The social circle that once embraced them now witnessed their humiliation. They drove to Queens, third-floor walk-up, 850 square feet industrial neighborhood. Monthly rent, $200. The contrast was staggering. From a $4 million townhouse to a cramped apartment with windows facing a brick wall. Their financial reality was brutal. Bank accounts remained frozen. Outstanding debts, $125,000 owed to Alexander from the court judgment, $90,000 in legal fees to their own attorneys. No income, both unemployed and unemployable, and healthcare credit cards maxed. Rachel found temp work making $18 hourly. Daniel applied for positions, but background checks revealed the federal investigation. Rejection after rejection, they lived on Rachel's modest income, barely covering rent and food. The American dream inverted. From privilege to poverty in 6 months, late August, approximately 10 days before September. Alexander's phone buzzed. Text from William. Daniel's plea hearing tomorrow at 10:00 a.m. U.S. Attorney's Office invited you to attend. Sentencing hearing if you want to provide victim impact statement. Alexander typed back, I'll be there. That evening, he opened his laptop and began writing. First line. On March 12, 2025, my son-in-law pushed me onto subway tracks in an attempted murder, motivated by greed. He paused, considering his words carefully. This was the final piece, the closing statement. Everything had led to this moment. Alexander wrote for 2 hours, revising until each sentence carried precise weight. When finished, he saved the document and closed the laptop. Tomorrow, he would deliver the final judgment. Then it would truly be over. The federal courthouse on Pearl Street gleamed in late August morning light. Alexander passed through security, took the elevator to the 15th floor, and entered the courtroom. Daniel sat at the defense table with his criminal attorney wearing an ill-fitting suit that hung on his gaunt frame. He'd aged a decade in 6 months. Rachel sat in the back row of the gallery, separate from her husband. She didn't look at him, he didn't look at her. Judge Harrison entered. They rose, then sat. The ritual formality of the justice system. Mr. Daniel Harrison, you've entered into a plea agreement with the government. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Daniel's voice barely carried. How do you plead to the charge of wire fraud? Guilty, Your Honor. And to money laundering, guilty. The judge reviewed the pre-sentence report. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michelle Park presented the government's position outlining Daniel's systematic theft over 3 years, the $467,000 stolen, the attempted murder when facing exposure. Daniel's attorney requested leniency, citing his client's acceptance of responsibility. Judge Harrison looked at Alexander. Does the victim wish to make a statement? Alexander stood and walked to the podium, placed his written statement down, but didn't read from it. He'd memorized every word. Your Honor, on March 12th, Daniel Harrison pushed me onto subway tracks because I discovered his theft and refused to surrender my company. I survived by lying between the rails as the train passed overhead. His voice remained steady, clinical. No emotion, just facts. The physical trauma lasted weeks. The betrayal is permanent. He didn't just steal money. He stole from patients, employees, everyone who trusted him. Then he sued me, claiming I was mentally incompetent, trying to finish what the subway couldn't. Alexander paused, meeting the judge's eyes. I asked the court maximum sentence within guidelines. Make the price of greed clear. He returned to his seat. The courtroom was silent. Daniel stared at the table. Rachel cried quietly in the back row. Judge Harrison reviewed his notes and then looked at Daniel. Mr. Harrison, your crimes were calculated, systematic, and sustained over years. The attempted murder, while not charged here, demonstrates consciousness of guilt and moral bankruptcy. You betrayed family, employer, and patients who depended on quality health care. He paused, letting the words settle. Federal guidelines suggest 18 to 24 months. This court sentences you to 18 months federal incarceration, followed by 5 years supervised release. Additionally, full restitution of $467,000 plus court costs. You will surrender to Bureau of Prisons within 30 days. The gavel struck. Daniel stood shakily, his attorney guiding him out. He glanced at Alexander as he passed, eye contact held for 3 seconds. Alexander's expression remained impassive. Daniel looked away first. A week later, Rachel had her own hearing. Because she'd cooperated fully and testified truthfully, she received probation. 3 years, 200 hours, community service, joint restitution, obligation, no prison, but a permanent criminal record. Her CFO credential worthless now. She worked retail at a Queens shopping center. Daniel entered federal prison camp in Pennsylvania, serving time separated from the wife who'd betrayed him to save herself. 3 days after Daniel's sentencing, Alexander sat in his Morgan Medical Solutions corner office. The company was thriving, revenue exceeding the old company's peak, reputation fully restored. Sarah Chen was now partner with 25% equity. They'd built a talented team. Dr. Marcus Rivera is medical director. 5 new clinic managers, expansion plans in development. Alexander's phone rang. Caller ID Rachel Morgan. He debated answering, finally picked up. Said nothing, just listened. Dad, please don't hang up. Her voice was broken, desperate. I need to talk to you. Alexander remained silent. Daniel's in prison. I'm on probation. We lost everything. I'm working retail, making minimum wage. I can't pay rent next month. Rachel's voice cracked. Mom won't help. I have nobody else. She was crying now. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I'm begging. Please, just enough to survive. I'm your daughter. I made terrible mistakes, but I'm still your daughter. The silence stretched. Finally, Alexander spoke. You stood on that platform. You watched him push me. You smiled. I was scared. He manipulated me. You're an adult. You made choices. Now live with them. So that's it? You're just abandoning me? You abandoned me when you chose him over everything I gave you. Goodbye, Rachel. Alexander hung up, blocked the number, returned to reviewing expansion plans. Sarah entered moments later with acquisition proposals. They discussed strategy, partnership, dynamic, easy, and professional. The company Alexander rebuilt was stronger than what existed before. He'd eliminated the dead weight, recruited genuine professionals, established operations on merit rather than nepotism. Evening came. Alexander stood at the window, hands in pockets, watching Manhattan's lights flicker on as darkness settled. His reflection in the glass showed an older man alone, but not lonely, carrying weight, but standing straight. Behind him, Sarah organized files, loyal presence, earned trust. Alexander turned from the window, back to his desk, opened the laptop, checked his calendar, meetings, strategy sessions, clinic inspections, future plans. Late August 2025, approaching September. The deadline met the story complete. He felt no triumph, no satisfaction in the traditional sense, just quiet certainty that justice had been served. He'd protected what he built over 30 years and demonstrated that betrayal carries a price. Daniel would serve 15 months with good behavior, emerge with a criminal record, and decades of restitution payments ahead. Rachel would navigate probation, working minimum wage jobs, understanding finally that actions have consequences. The company thrived without them, better without them. Alexander returned to work, planning tomorrow's agenda. The betrayal existed in the past. Justice existed in the present. The future was his to shape now without the weight of people trying to steal it. Justice restored didn't mean revenge satisfied. It meant balance returned. Alexander had survived an attack and responded appropriately, systematically, legally. No glorious combat, just consequences delivered permanently. He worked late that evening, Sarah beside him, both building toward tomorrow. The city hummed outside, indifferent and vast. Inside this office, order prevailed, trust earned rather than assumed, loyalty proven rather than expected. That was enough. Alexander closed his laptop as midnight approached. Stood stretched, looked one final time at the city sprawling below. Somewhere out there, his daughter struggled with poverty and regret. His former son-in-law occupied a prison cell. His former company existed only in bankruptcy filings. He felt no joy in their suffering, but he felt no guilt either. They'd wanted his life and his company. Now they had nothing, and he had rebuilt stronger than before. Alexander turned off the lights and left the office, locking the door behind him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new work. The past was finished. Justice was served. Life continued. 2 months later, Alexander's cell phone rang on a crisp October morning. He didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. Mr. Morgan, this is Jason Miller from Westside Medical Group. The voice was professional, cautious. We're exploring acquisition opportunities and heard Morgan Medical Solutions might be interested. Alexander checked his calendar. I'm available Thursday at 10 euro. Perfect. One more thing, we understand you had a situation with your previous COO. Former son-in-law, currently serving time for fraud. Ah, that's what we heard. Our concern is avoiding similar problems. Alexander smiled thinly. Come Thursday, I'll show you exactly how we prevent that now. After hanging up, Alexander called Sarah Chen into his office. Westside Medical is interested. Meeting Thursday. Sarah nodded, already making notes. Their 4 Manhattan clinics would fit perfectly with our expansion strategy. They're concerned about our history with Daniel. Our new compliance systems are bulletproof. Show them everything Thursday. Complete transparency. Sarah smiled. They'll be impressed. They should be. We built something better from the wreckage. That evening, Alexander walked through Central Park, watching fallen leaves scatter in the October wind. The months since Daniel's sentencing had brought unexpected peace. Morgan Medical Solutions was thriving beyond projections. The staff culture had transformed without the toxic influence of Daniel and Rachel. Alexander's phone buzzed with a text, a name he hadn't expected to see: Rachel. Dad, I got a new job, assistant store manager. Not much, but a step up. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I'm trying, that's all. He read it twice, then slipped the phone back into his pocket without responding. The park path wound through trees, displaying autumn colors, red and gold, and fading green. Life continuing its cycles regardless of human drama. When Alexander reached his apartment, he found an envelope in his mailbox. Official letterhead from the federal prison in Pennsylvania. Inside, a single-page letter. Alexander, I've had time to think. I'm sorry isn't enough, I know that. What I did was unforgivable. The money, the lying, the subway. I have no excuses. I write not seeking forgiveness, but to acknowledge my wrongs. You deserve better. Rachel deserved better. I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I destroyed everything that mattered. Daniel. Alexander placed the letter on his kitchen counter. No anger rose at seeing Daniel's handwriting, no bitterness at his words. Just calm detachment, like reading about a stranger. He took out his phone, looked at Rachel's via text again. His finger hovered over the reply button. Not yet. Maybe someday, but not yet. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too profound. He needed more time. Alexander poured himself a glass of water, looking out at the city lights. 62 years old, starting over in ways he never expected. The company was stronger, but family ties lay in ruins. Had justice been worth the cost, he didn't know. But he knew he'd had no choice. Some betrayals can't be forgiven, only survived. The next morning, Alexander arrived early at the office. Sarah was already there preparing documents for the West Side meeting. You're here early, he observed. Big day. Wanted everything perfect. She handed him a folder. Projections for the combined companies. We'd control 18% of the Manhattan private healthcare market. Alexander reviewed the numbers. Impressive. There's more. Sarah opened her laptop. I've been developing a training program. Ethics in healthcare management. Using our experience as a case study, anonymized, of course. Turning our trauma into education. I like it. I thought we could offer it to all healthcare executives in New York. Prevent another Daniel Harrison. Alexander nodded, appreciation warming his voice. Let's do it. The West Side executives arrived precisely at 10 hour. 3 men in expensive suits, cautious smiles, firm handshakes. Alexander led them to the conference room where Sarah had prepared a comprehensive presentation. Before we discuss acquisition, Alexander began, I want to address your concerns about our history. He told them everything. The betrayal, the theft, the restructuring. No embellishment, no self-pity, just facts. What we learned, he concluded, is that trust without verification is negligence. We've built systems ensuring no single person can compromise our integrity. Sarah will walk you through them. Sarah's presentation was meticulous. Triple signature requirements for expenditures above $5,000. External quarterly audits. Whistleblower protections. Board oversight of all related party transactions. The West Side executives nodded approvingly. Most companies that experience fraud try to bury it, their CEO said. You've built something better because of it. We had no choice, Alexander replied. When the foundation cracks, you can patch it or rebuild stronger. We chose the latter. After they left, promising to continue discussions, Sarah turned to Alexander. That went well? They saw what we've built from the ashes. They want to be part of it. Alexander's phone buzzed. Another text from Rachel. I understand if you never want to speak to me again. I just want you to know I'm sorry. Truly sorry. This time Alexander typed a reply, I need more time. 3 simple words. Not forgiveness, but not permanent exile either. A crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. Later that day, Alexander visited one of their clinics in Brooklyn. He walked the halls, greeting staff by name, observing operations with a practiced eye. The clinic director, Dr. Patel, joined him. Patient volume up 15% this quarter, she reported. Your new intake system is working beautifully. Staff satisfaction. Highest it's been in years. The profit-sharing program helps. Alexander nodded. This was what he had built the company for originally. Quality care, satisfied providers, sustainable business model. Now restored and improved after Daniel's corruption nearly destroyed everything. We're implementing the community outreach program next month. Dr. Patel continued. Free screening days, health education seminars. Good. Healthcare isn't just treatment, it's prevention education. As Alexander walked back to the subway, yes, he still took the subway despite what happened, he reflected on how things had changed. 6 months ago, he'd been fighting for his company's survival, for justice, for his legacy. Now he was building again. New structures, new safeguards, new purpose. The subway platform no longer triggered anxiety. He'd faced his worst fear there and survived. Nothing could be more frightening than those moments under the train. Every day since was borrowed time, a gift he wouldn't waste. His phone rang. William Blackwood. Just heard from the prosecutor. Daniel's trying to reduce his sentence with more cooperation, offering information about other executives in the industry engaged in similar fraud. Let him, if it helps clean up the industry, good. That's surprisingly magnanimous of you. It's not magnanimity, it's pragmatism. The healthcare system works better without criminals running it. After hanging up, Alexander considered calling Rachel. Not yet. The wound was healing but still tender. Perhaps after the holidays. Small steps toward whatever relationship might be possible in the future. That night, Alexander updated his will. The original had left everything to Rachel, managed by Daniel, until she reached a certain age. The new document was different. 50% of his estate would go to a healthcare education foundation he was establishing. 25% to Sarah Chen, who had proven her loyalty beyond question. The remaining 25% he left in trust for Rachel with strict conditions. She would receive quarterly distributions only if she maintained employment and completed both community service and ethics training courses. The trust would be managed by an independent fiduciary, not by Rachel herself. Not vindictive, but not naive either. A path to redemption that required effort on her part. Alexander signed the documents, feeling a weight lift. This was fair. This honored his original intention to provide for family while acknowledging the new reality. As winter approached, Morgan Medical Solutions continued to thrive. The acquisition of Westside Medical proceeded smoothly. The ethics training program Sarah developed received industry recognition. Alexander found himself invited to speak at healthcare conferences about corporate governance and fraud prevention. One December evening, as snow fell gently outside his office window, Alexander received an unexpected visitor. The receptionist called, hesitant. Mr. Morgan, Rachel is here. She doesn't have an appointment. Alexander paused, considering. Send her up. Rachel entered his office cautiously, like someone approaching an unpredictable animal. She looked different. Thinner hair, shorter clothing, simple but professional. The entitlement that once shadowed her features had vanished. Thank you for seeing me. She remained standing until Alexander gestured to a chair. What brings you here, Rachel? I've been promoted, regional assistant manager now, overseeing 3 stores. She spoke quickly, nervously. I finished my community service early. The judge was impressed. Alexander nodded, waiting. I'm not here to ask for money. Rachel's hands twisted in her lap. Or forgiveness. I wanted you to know I'm trying to rebuild my life the right way. I'm glad to hear that. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history. Have you visited Daniel? Alexander asked finally. Rachel shook her head. No, we're divorcing. He blames me for testifying against him. You did what was necessary. I did what was right. Finally. She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. Too late, but I did it. Alexander studied his daughter. The girl he'd raised, the woman who'd betrayed him, the person trying to rebuild from ashes of her own making. He felt something shift inside his chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. She was taking responsibility. It was a start. Would you like to have dinner sometime? He asked. Not today, but sometime. Rachel's eyes widened in surprise. I'd like that. Very much. I'll call you after the new year. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. The company looks successful. I see the new clinics opening. We're doing well. I'm glad. She seemed to want to say more than simply nodded. Thank you for seeing me. After she left, Alexander sat motionless, processing the encounter. The anger that had fueled him for months had faded to a dull ache. Not gone entirely, perhaps, never would be, but no longer consuming. Sarah knocked lightly, then entered with a questioning look. That was Rachel, Alexander explained. First time we've spoken face to face since the sentencing. How was it? Strange, but not terrible. He shuffled papers on his desk, focusing on the familiar. She's trying to rebuild her life. Sarah nodded. People can change. Not everyone, but some. We'll see. Alexander turned to the acquisition documents, waiting for his signature. One step at a time. As Christmas approached, Alexander declined invitations to various industry parties, preferring solitude to forced socializing. On Christmas Eve, he walked through his neighborhood, watching families through illuminated windows, celebrations he was no longer part of. He didn't feel sorry for himself. He'd chosen this path when he decided to fight back against betrayal rather than submit to it. Justice had its price, and he'd paid it willingly. His phone rang, an unfamiliar number. Mr. Morgan, this is Warden Phillips from FCI, Pennsylvania. I'm afraid I have some difficult news about Daniel Harrison. Alexander listened as the warden explained. Daniel had attempted suicide in his cell. He'd been found in time, was under medical supervision, expected to recover. He left a note addressed to you. The warden's voice was carefully neutral. I can mail it or read it to you now. Read it, please. The warden cleared his throat. Alexander, I can't live with what I've done. Not just the money, but trying to kill you. Trying to take everything you built. I'm sorry doesn't fix anything, but it's all I have. Please tell Rachel I understand why she testified. She deserved better than me. You both did. Goodbye. Daniel. Alexander thanked the warden and hung up. He stood motionless on the sidewalk, snow falling around him, considering how to feel. Not satisfaction, not pity either. Just a hollow acknowledgement that some wounds never heal for anyone involved. He continued his walk, passing brightly decorated storefronts, holiday music spilling onto the street, life continuing its rhythms despite personal tragedies. Alexander's phone rang again. Sarah Chen. Merry Christmas, boss. Just checking if you need anything before I leave town tomorrow. I'm fine, Sarah. Enjoy your family time. You're sure you could join us? My parents would love to meet you. Another time, perhaps? I have plans. A small lie to ease her concern. After they spoke, Alexander turned toward home, walking more briskly as the snow intensified. At his apartment, he checked his mail and found a card from Rachel. Simple message. Thinking of you this Christmas. R. He placed it on his mantle, the only holiday decoration in his apartment. Alexander poured himself a glass of scotch and sat by the window, watching snow transform the city into something softer, purer than it usually appeared. 62 years old, alone on Christmas company, thriving family shattered. Was it worth it? If he could go back to that moment in the elevator alcove when he first overheard Daniel and Rachel plotting, would he change anything? No. He'd still fight, still seek justice, still protect what he'd built. But perhaps he'd look for earlier signs, intervene before betrayal became attempted murder. Perhaps he'd try harder to separate Rachel from Daniel's influence. Too late for such thoughts now. What happened had happened. All that remained was moving forward. Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from William. Federal prosecutor called. Daniel's suicide attempt changes nothing legally, but they're considering compassionate circumstances for reduced sentencing. Alexander typed back, I won't object if they reduce it slightly. Not because I forgive, but because vengeance isn't the point. Justice is. New Year's Eve arrived, Manhattan glittering with anticipation. Alexander attended a small industry dinner, making appearances expected of someone in his position. He left early, preferring the quiet of his apartment to watching others celebrate. As midnight approached, Alexander stood on his balcony despite the cold. Fireworks exploded over the city, marking the transition to 2026. A new year, new possibilities. His phone buzzed with texts from various colleagues, one from Sarah. Happy New Year. This year will be even better for Morgan Medical. We're just getting started. And unexpectedly, one from Rachel. Happy New Year, Dad. Thank you for saying you'll call. I'll be waiting. Alexander watched the fireworks fade, the city settling back into its normal rhythm. He'd survived attempted murder, rebuilt his company, seen justice served, begun the long process of healing family wounds that might never fully close. He hadn't forgiven yet, might never completely forgive. But he'd stopped defining himself by what happened on that subway platform. Stopped focusing on the betrayal and started focusing on rebuilding. Tomorrow, Morgan Medical Solutions would continue expanding. Next week, he'd finalize the West Side acquisition. Next month, perhaps, he'd have dinner with Rachel. Small steps toward whatever future awaited. Alexander went inside, closed the balcony door, shutting out the cold. The apartment felt different somehow. Not empty, but open. Not lonely, but peaceful. A space for new beginnings, not just memories of betrayal. He'd built a company from nothing once. He could build a life from these fragments too. The past was finished. Justice was served. Life continued. And tomorrow was another day to build.